Welcome back to the channel. This is Yuglo Fashion and thank you very much for stopping by. Today we'll be learning how to make this front dress with gathered hem, and it also has a puff sleeve. So please stay tuned to the end and enjoy the tutorial. It's well detailed. So like and share also this video. Thank you very much and stay blessed. This is the fabric I'll be using. It's a polished cotton fabric and it's the light one. So I've drafted the bodice pattern on this fabric. I folded it into two and I labeled this the back. I'll be cutting the back first, so I labeled this the back. So from shoulder to nipple point is 11 inches, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to half length, and shoulder to hip length. I determined the hip on 24.5. Now for the length of this first part of the bodies, the upper part, I used 38. The 38, how I got it, the length of the dress, I subtracted like 12 inches from it. The 12 inches is for the gathered part. So after subtracting that, I realized 38, so I used 38 for the length of this and I added half inch to it. The half inch is to stitch the gathered part to it. I later measured the total circumference of the fabric, the total circumference of the bodies, and for the hip, I transferred the measurement I have at the hip to the hem. I also added the seam allowance of 2 inches to the hem. So after that, I later measure additional 4 inches. That's because it has like slant shape, like this A shape, and it starts from the hip. So I'll be connecting the 4 inches back to the hip. Having done that, I cut it out. Then I placed it back on the remaining fabric to cut the front bodies. So for the front, I added 2 inches for the buttonhole. Because they are on each other, I measured 1 inch at the side here. Then for the neckline, I measured 2.5 inches by 1 because I'm cutting both front and back of the bodies together. So the 1 inch, I will slant it back to the neckline. I opened the joint part of the front bodies. Then I separated the back from the front. So I'll be doing some adjustments at the front bodies. So for the neckline, at the shoulder here, I first measured half inch, then connected it back to the neckline. The reason is because there's a collar there. For the collar to relax very well, that's why I removed half from the front. Then for the width of the neckline, I measured 2.5 at first, then later measured 6 inches. So for the first 2.5 inch, I'll give it a cuff shape. Then after the buttonhole allowance, I measured 1 inch then connect it back to the 6-inch with a slant shape. Then later I cut it out. So this is the result. For the gathered part of it, to get the circumference, I measured the circumference of the hem of the upper bodice. The total circumference there is 38 inches. I multiplied that by 3. So this depends on how gathered you want the hem to be. So now I use 38 multiplied by 3. Then the length is 12 inches. I added 1 for folding, then half again for joining, so which makes it 39.5. For the sleeve, the length of the sleeve is 14 inches. There is little band there, so I first measured the 14 inches. Later I measured 5 inch for the bicep. The circumference of the sleeve is 16 inches. So I measured the 16 inches, the seam allowance, the his allowance, then I added seam allowance of 1 again. It's a puff sleeve, but the puff is not really much. So whatever I have at the bicep, I'll transfer it to the elbow. Then here I measured 3. I'll just I'll just cuff it to meet the 3 inches. The reason for this is because there is puff here as well. So whatever I have here also must be more than the circumference of the armhole. After cutting that, for the band, I measure the circumference of the elbow divided by 2. Then the length is 2 inches. While sewing, I'll be folding it this way, and you can see the way it is. That's the way it will be folded. So let's move to the machine and start our stitching. So before that, I realized that to sew the front bodies, if I'm to use this button or the 2 inches I added, I will have issues while stitching the neckline. So I just cut out the 2 inches, then later place the front bodies on the remaining fabric. Now I started the cutting from the neckline where the V shape started from. You can see. Now after cutting the shape out, I ensured that it still remains the 2 inches allowance I needed. Now to stitch the sleeve, I'll be folding half in. You can iron this part if you don't want to stitch on it. Then I notch the middle of the 2 and pin them together. So the excess I have there, I'll just split. After pleating the excess, The folded parts I stitch at first. Now top stitch it on the fabric, on the sleeve rather. Now to stitch the front bodice, the button side of it, the buttonhole side, I added paper stay to it. Then I'll stitch the two together from the right side. After stitching the right side, I'll fold half in. You can iron the half as well. You iron the half, then I'll just stitch it this way. Now I'm stitching the wrong side now. After stitching that, I stitch both front and back bodies together. The shoulder, I stitch the shoulders together, and I measure the circumference I have at the neckline for the collar. So I added paper stay to the collar as well. So the circumference I have there is 16 inches. I added 1 inch to it. And folded into two. I notched the middle. So the 1 inch I measured, now I'll just give it a curve shape back to the other side. Then at the middle here, I measured half and slant back to the curved part. It's in pairs, so I stitch on it. So this is what I have after stitching. And first of all, I stitch it on the wrong side of the neckline, then later fold half in also, and I stitch on the right side. Having done with that, I stitch the measurement. So for the gathered parts, I stitch once, then pull the thread. You can stitch more than once so that the thread won't cut along the way. Then I stitch it to the hem of the upper bodice. So thank you very much. I later fixed the sleeve. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. Stay blessed. Love you.